My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Hey, community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. I actually just got back from, and I had to buy a hat at the airport, Kansas APCO, specifically, presenting at their conference. Got to do a roundtable, got to do 2 sessions, and I got to do my first ever closing keynote. And for folks who have not had the opportunity to go to a conference, whether it's the big national conferences or your local state conference, you should really look into doing so. Even if you got to shell out your own money to do it, it is just a wonderful opportunity, especially with the state conferences on a smaller scale, to connect with people locally who are dealing with the same things you're dealing with in your regions, learn from other dispatchers, and really connect. And I really had a wonderful time in Kansas, and I really appreciate Kansas APCO reaching out, having me come out and join your guys' conference. It honestly, truly was an amazing time, and I learned so much from folks in Kansas, including your radios go down way too much for my anxiety level, listening to everyone's stories during your guys' banquet and hearing how often you guys deal with radio outages because of weather. I'm good. Don't need it. Don't want it. I'm okay with it. So again, thank you, Kansas APCO, to every dispatcher that I got to meet while in Kansas. Shout out to you guys. You guys are doing amazing work, and I look forward to meeting and hearing from more of you. And with that being said, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors, who are a big reason that we're able to continue to go out to these conferences and meet with dispatchers. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. As always, thank you to our sponsors. You really are a big help in helping us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Now on to today's guest, who has over 19 years of experience in 911. They started as an Orlando fire dispatcher, went up to assistant manager, to manager in just 12 years. Now, anyone who has jumped from frontline to management in 911, or really in any line of work, understands that it is difficult, and we're not perfect. And Matthew's here to talk about what they've learned, the good, the bad, and everything in between. My guest today, Matthew. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Ashley.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am well. Like I said in my opener, I spent Sunday through Wednesday in Kansas, really running a marathon. I flew back and I had the sense to take Thursday off, because that Thursdays are my Mondays. But then my sense left me, and I signed up for 16-hour days, Friday and Saturday. So I worked 2 16s, and then my Sunday I was working a shift trade So I worked another 8-hour day. So I am recovering today.
Yeah, I bet. So, yeah. Uh,
Awesome. Well,
let y'all know, just because I have my uniform on, it's only because I didn't have a chance to change. I'm not representing the Orlando Fire Department. I'm telling you my personal experience and opinions. In no way should, even though there are lessons to be learned from the mistakes I've made, it's not the official line of the city of Orlando or the Orlando Fire Department. I didn't get a chance to change my clothes. But
hey, we love a good disclaimer here at the Let's Talk Dispatch podcast.
I want somebody to go and say, "Well, the Orlando Fire Department takes." No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm telling you my personal experience and what I've done here in Orlando. Just more in the industry. It doesn't feel like I've been here that long.
Well, how did you get into public safety?
Okay, so this is the worst answer. If anybody wants to be inspired, this is not the answer. Okay, so I have a chronic health condition, and the city of Orlando, at the time that I was hired, offered 100% coverage for your health insurance, and if you stayed for 25 years, you got to keep your health insurance as a retiree for $0.
Wow.
So that's really what attracted me to the Orlando Fire Department specifically. And a friend of mine's mom was a dispatcher. She's like, I put a word for you. That's what got me here. It was purely financial, not financial. I'm sorry. It was purely a benefit. And the thing that I've learned about working in government is even when they start to dial back on those nice benefits, because now we pay like $18 a pay period. And you do keep it for life if you serve 25 years, but you have to pay what employees pay. So it went from to some money, but still, even looking compared to private sector, our insurance and retirement benefits are so fantastic compared to other places, and that's a huge benefit people don't realize. And then one of the things that also kept me, you were talking about time trades, right? Shift swap. Where else in the world other than public safety do you get to swap shifts the way that we do? Maybe the restaurants, maybe. But I don't. I'm blown away by like people are like, well, I got to take the day off. I'm like, switch off with somebody, and like, what are you talking about? That doesn't exist. That's not a thing. And I'm like, oh, we time trade all the time. They're like, what? What is a time trade? And even within our organization, when we have an issue and we have to go to like human resources, even though they know, they kind of know about it, it doesn't make sense to them. They're like, what are y'all talking about? What do you mean?
No, it's true. It really, and you know what? I love that that's the reason you got into this line of work, because it's such a reality. Right? Like we could talk about like, I want to help people. I want to do that. Sometimes I'm just trying to have good benefits and a decent paycheck and a consistent job. You know what I mean? And that's real. And
it's people complain, like, hey, it's really low pay and stuff, or it's this or it's that, or have to work midnight shift. But now I'm seeing people come in 19 years old and they're starting at $20 an hour, and they have really good insurance and really good retirement, because the city does a nice, like, they contribute, or they match 7% or something. I don't know, but it's a lot. So I'm thinking, if you start here at 19 at $20 an hour, and you've got that really good health insurance, and you keep contributing to your retirement plan, and the city keeps contributing, if you work here till you're 40, you're pretty well set.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys have Publix where you are?
Doesn't sound familiar. We have like CalPERS for our like retirement stuff out here in Cali.
Oh, that's right. You're in California. So here in Orlando, there's not Orlando, it's all over the Southeast. There's a grocery store called Publix, and they're like the nice grocery store.
Oh, I see.
And what people say is, even if you start as a bagger, if you work 20 years at Publix, you have $1 million when you retire.
Wow.
And this, working for the city, maybe it's not that beneficial, but you could get pretty close if you can stick the things like, having to rotate through midnight shift and stuff. And if you move up, if you're a go-getter, you go to school, you take a bunch of classes, you apply for the supervisor positions. you could do pretty well.
Yeah.
Even when we talk about low starting wages and the economy, still, if you stick to it, and you're persistent and you follow the rules, you don't get yourself in trouble.
It's true though. It's one of those things like when we talk about pay, obviously I would imagine California and Orlando, we're kind of the bigger states, bigger cities that are being serviced. I just went to Kansas. The cost of living is different,
Sure.
there's a fluctuation. But overall, when we're talking about, pay equality in this industry, that's you have to kind of unpack it. It's going back to all these things. We have to be labeled as first responders, get more money. Like we there's an ongoing battle of convincing folks who don't understand what we do, the validity of what we do and
Yes.
why we need the pay that we're asking for. Right.
Right. And I hate to say, sometimes I think we go a little too far trying to convince people, and we get to the point where at least here in our area, it turns into like when we're given pay raises, because everybody in Central Florida in communications, at least, in all the agencies in our area, have gotten significant pay increases.
Okay.
And the response was, but it's not enough. But the police officers and the firefighters make more money. We're like, okay, but they do. You're right, because they have a different job.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, hey guys, you got a 13% pay increase. The first thing you should say is thank you. And then maybe let's try to work on some other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's pretty good. We're pretty fortunate here. So I that's a message that, I want everybody listening to know, is that it is possible to move forward and get some decent sized increases. And employers are starting to listen, and the public is starting to listen. So I think those efforts are being fruitful, just maybe not, as quickly as we want them to be.
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, I want my union contract to be up to 50%, and I want every bump and but that's just not realistic, right? Like, unfortunately, we're dealing with a business. And I think people forget about that.
They do.
Like, our departments, they are businesses. And at the end of the day, they're worried about that bottom line. They are protecting themselves, their brand. And you got to be strategic in these negotiations and fighting for things that we should have, but we're dealing with a business. I think if I was to go to my department head and just be like, hey, you like us, right? We do good work, right? Okay, give us money. If that was the conversation we were having, of course, but we're not talking. We're talking with the business.
And we got to remember that it's taxpayer money too. We just annexed a whole bunch of land here in Orlando, and it needs probably, I think it's something like 60 new police officers and 30 new firefighters.
Oh wow.
That's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So when we want new carpet in the comm center, we want a full-time staff assistant to do time cards and stuff. The city says no. There's a reason they say no. It's because they got to pay for something else that we need. And that was actually something I really had to learn as a manager, is that there's no infinite supply of money to the municipality, and everything you buy takes away money from somebody else, and that's why we don't get everything we want all the time. Not because people don't like us or our boss doesn't like us.
Yeah, and I just think that it's definitely. I mean, and we're talking heavily today about making that transition from frontline, which I would say, is a whole different mentality than when you get into management, managing people, managing the department, and that shift that you have to take. I say all the time, like when my supervisor texts me, it's not normally, it's not on my day off at 6 a.m. It's not to say hi, right?
No.
It's usually to give me some news that I'm coming in or I need to work, or and that's tough. Like, being the bearer of bad news is tough.
Yeah, and one of the things that I learned, it's been a hard lesson to learn actually, is that as a manager and a supervisor, we're not making those life and death decisions anymore.
Mm.
I mean, they are, but they're long term. And the habit we have, particularly that we learn as dispatchers, to immediately respond to everything is not a good habit as a manager or a supervisor. You got to take some time and think about it. You've got to make sure you're not responding emotionally. Don't just fire off an email and say, you're doing your training because I said so. You need to really why am I reacting? And does this even need a reaction? Does it even need a reply? But what we were taught in the dispatch center, the 911 center, is you got to have a sense of urgency about everything that you do. And really, as a manager, as a supervisor, particularly managing people, is when you do that and you react to things that your employees have done, you tend to react poorly or overreact. You got to take time to think about it, moderate your response, and sometimes even, hey, I got to check with somebody else and make sure that my view of this situation or request that I've gotten that's been emailed to me outside of the chain of command at 4:00 in the morning about something we don't really need to be talking about. Does it even need to be responded to, or do I need to just let this go? Say, okay, somebody's having a moment. And we were when I came up off the floor, I was like, they gave me a phone and they gave me a pager and they gave me a radio. I'm like, I got to be connected all the time, all the time. I got to be, and I got to respond, and I got to respond at 2:00 in the morning so the employees know that I'm here and they know that I'm paying attention to them. But I have shift supervisors for that. That's what they're to do. They need me to let them do their job. But that's a hard transition. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into your transition, what was it like for you in the beginning? It sounds like you didn't really. It sounds like you jumped into dispatch, and did you know what you were getting into? Were you completely blindsided?
It was completely blindsided me. The only experience I had is I had worked when I first got out of college. I worked at a company that was a third-party administrator for health insurance plans, and it was all on the phone. So it used to being people pretty mad at me on the phone. What do you mean you're not going to pay for my MRI or whatever? I mean, it was never something like that. It was always these really bizarre things that, and not just doing that, but like taking open enrollment and stuff. And what do you mean my health insurance went up $50 a paycheck? So I had that experience. So getting on the phones and talking to people on the phones wasn't that big of a transition, but the EMD was, man, that was tough for me, because I'm like, what do you mean turn on the outside light? It's daytime. Why do I have to ask this stupid question? They already know the answer, or this doesn't apply, or and I fought against it for so long, and I always thought I'm smarter than EMD. I'm smarter than EMD. And I got to tell you, we have employees when they come in and it's like their third week here and they do the same thing I was doing. I'm like, yep. In fact, I was in a different comm center and they were talking about going for accreditation. I said, hey, I noticed your call takers don't say turn on the outside light. And the guy in charge was like, that's a stupid thing to say in the middle of the day. And I'm like, well, you're not going to get accredited if your folks don't say it, because it's part of the protocol. And the academy has a reason why you're supposed to do it. Yeah. I don't think it's a very good reason. They say that responders will look for that outside light on during the middle of the day. It's a sign that something's not right. And I'm like, okay, I get it, but nobody driving a fire truck or police car is going to look for that. But it was tough to be so stuck to those protocols. The radio was fun. I like the radio. I still like the radio. If I ever go down to the comm center and take a position, it's gonna be the radio. Yeah. Like, oh, this is exciting. This is fun. But yeah, no, it was a difficult transition for me from doing pretty much whatever I wanted to do to, you have these protocols you have to follow. And if you don't follow them, you got to meet with somebody and they tell you, hey, you didn't follow the protocol right. And hey, we're going to be really strict, because we were working on our first accreditation when I got hired. And when you get accredited through International Academy of Emergency Dispatch, they're pretty strict. So the loosey-goosey stuff, like people who had worked here before me were doing, that was getting corrected too. I was like, oh man, I don't know that I'm going to make this, until kind of the light bulb went on. It must have been it was my second year, that, hey, there's a reason that we do this. The reason we have these protocols, and we got to follow them. And the light bulb that kind of went on for me was, we had an apartment fire here with a mom and her kids trapped in her apartment, and I had to follow the fire protocol while I waited for the search and rescue crew to get in and break down her door and pull them out. And I couldn't have made that stuff up on my own. There's no way I would have had the presence of mind to think about what to say to her. I did ad lib quite a lot, because it took a little while to find her. But yeah, that was kind of eye opening for me, and that's kind of what that fire call, which you can find it on YouTube. I say okay 8,000 times. And I also had a sinus infection, so it sounded like, okay.
They're like, is this AI? What's
Lived in perpetuity on YouTube. So trainers always show like new employees that new hires that walk through the center, and they're like playing it for them on YouTube. And I'm like, oh god.
But it's so true. That's a big, huge difference between like fire, medical, and police, is that you do have to follow these, no cards, I would say, and you got to ask the question the way it's asked. Where and like police, we're winging it. We're asking, we're getting through those 5 W's, and we're moving forward.
We sit in the same comm center as the police department, even though we're separate agencies. We're together, and I'm like, what are they saying?
What did I just ask?
What? But yeah, so that, and that apartment fire kind of, it kind of helped me realize that I did want to be here, and I wanted to be here long term, and it motivated me to do stuff like to be a trainer and to be a senior dispatcher, and even though I wasn't asked to do it, I wrote some training scenarios to help us with some oddball fire stuff that we didn't do. At the time, our continuing education stuff was, here, read this journal article and take the quiz, and that was all we did. And I was like, why don't we do like some simulations or some scenarios together? Because I really felt like I was out there in left field and kind of not prepared for this. And that's kind of what got me started moving towards moving up the ladder here, was, being more involved in training and starting to make suggestions, and getting over myself when the suggestion wasn't implemented for whatever reason. And we had some big fires. We had some hard calls. We had some hard medical calls those next couple of years. But, when our manager left and our assistant manager got promoted and we had that job opening, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I got to move up. And I actually applied for the manager job first when that job was vacant. And I got a phone call from the deputy chief, and he's like, you've only been here 9 years.
Hey, look, I'm all for it. Put your name in the hat and see what they say. So.
Yeah, but I mean, he was very nice about it. But he was like, yeah, we're going to go with the candidate who's been here, 3 times as long as you have. I understand. But then when she was promoted to manager, that's what I was promoted to the assistant manager. I had to go through the interview process again. And, it's it was a learning experience. I mean, every day is a learning experience. And some of the stuff I learned then, I've had to forget because I learned the wrong things.
You know what? I do love that mentality. I think too often our supervisors, and even, when I did management when I was a social worker, and too often we want to be perfect in the eyes of the folks we are supervising, so we don't own our mistakes in front of them.
Yeah.
But we need to own our mistakes. We need to tell people we're human and we're going to make mistakes. And when we do, we're going to own it, and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to get better.
Yeah. And that's, that self-awareness is something that I value so much. Like when they ask me, what do you want in a new dispatcher? I'm like, I need somebody who's willing to learn from their mistakes. Nobody's going to be perfect when they start here. And I don't, and we have some old school people here who have been here a lot longer than I have. They're like, all right, they screwed up. Let's get rid of let's get rid of them. I'm like, no, because learn, and they admit they screwed up. They, because you get new hires, they come in and they have a bad day and they get rated bad on the paperwork and they go, whatever, man. Which some of them, they're like, hey, I really messed up, and can I get some extra training? Can somebody teach me how to do this better? And you're like, that's the person I want to keep. Let's keep them. We've got some old people that are like, all right, they're at day 60 and they made the same, they made a mistake, so let's fire them right now. And I'm like, okay, let's hold on.
Look, the way our staffing is set up, we need to train these people. What is his Josh from Las Vegas Fire Rescue? Okay.
Works somewhere else now, but he does that presentation about don't eat your young.
Yeah.
And it's really impactful. And I'm like, he's telling stories about being in Las Vegas Fire Rescue, and he's like, yeah, we have this one dispatcher who doesn't want new people to sit next to her. And I'm like, this sounds familiar. And he said, like, hey, why don't you want them to sit next to you? They should they don't know anything. Well, they should sit next to you then, because you've been here for 20 years and you know everything, and you should be teaching them.
So painful.
I don't want to be bothered. That's part of the job. But yeah, that's whoa.
It's such a reality. And one thing that I do love that we do at, Raspy Dispatcher is we talk about that. I tell people all the time, like, all centers are not created equal. And if you are working in a center who acts like this, like, what can you do to change it? Because you're gonna lose people, whether it's OGs who are tired of it or new people who have no buy-in. I've been here months. I can go get another job. Right. You're gonna lose folks.
Yeah, but I don't understand. It's so pervasive in the 911 industry, and I'm just like, well, they have to earn their stripes with me, and I'm like, well, they got hired. Yeah. The background check, they passed the polygraph, they passed the drug test. Yeah. Let's give them a chance, because every person we keep is less overtime you have to work. Yeah. But then we get to the point where we only have like 2 openings, and everybody's like, I need somebody to quit so I can get more overtime.
Not gonna lie, we had someone leave. I'm liking the little overtime that's available.
I definitely there's over the years who have made their budgets based on the overtime they were earning, and they were upset when we hired new people. Like, no, I need the time I'm getting. I'm like, that's not guaranteed.
It's not. It really isn't. Yeah. But it is really a reality that a lot of our centers are dealing with, is that we need to take care of our new dispatchers. It's actually one of the most common things that folks slide into my DMs to talk about, is like, how do I deal with this dispatcher who treats me poorly when I'm just trying to do this job? And me personally, the growth that has happened since 2018 to now alone in technology in our centers is tremendous, right? And I do not want my trainees to have to, and I've said this before, dispatch barefoot uphill in the snow because I dispatched barefoot uphill in the snow. Right. You know what I mean?
Ring binder for something.
Yeah.
We used to have them all lining the one wall, and you have to look something up. I was a mean girl when I was, right before I became a senior dispatcher, and for a couple of years while I was a senior dispatcher, I was a mean girl. I was. Mm-hmm. I fell right into that mentality, and looking back, I'm like, this was uncool.
Yeah. And I think it's Roxy who has a presentation like she says she's a recovering mean girl.
Yes.
It's easy to do.
I started using that term after reading an article from her. I love the movie, but I realized that is, that's the clique we had going on. And they even had a name. And I was like a member of the association, because it was actually, some girls, mm-hmm. ladies, and they had this like a club with their initials, and mm-hmm. Like she, then it was like, yeah, because we're all the best dispatchers, we're the most skilled, and they should just do what we say. And now, looking back on it as a manager, and I'm thinking that wasn't the right way to behave, and being the most skilled person but being a jerk it doesn't make you the best person then.
Yeah. And it just makes the job harder. It takes so much more energy to be mean or to be unkind. in these spaces than just to be nice.
Yeah, I keep saying, I'd much rather have a mediocre call taker that gets some non-compliance, and we got to coach them a little bit. But man, they're nice and they're helpful, and they do time trades to help people with their child care. And if there's a they like show them the ropes without being asked, and they're like always treat people well, and you want to sit next to them. Then the person that, man, they answer that phone in a half a ring, and they're 1,000% solid on EMD every time, and they always get the right dispatch. They always send the closest units, but boy, are they a jerk.
Yeah.
It's just like I don't want that. And for our mentality was no, we need that person because they'll come through in an emergency. And I was like, but every day, every moment is an emergency, but it's not our emergency. So let's get better. The people who are mediocre, let's help them get better. And if they're nice, let's help them teach the people who are really good but mean how to be nicer.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think, embrace that. And then we have a couple of people that are unreceptive.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes you got to get rid of that person in the room who's making the room a terrible place to be. I mean, I played basketball my whole life, and I coached basketball a bit. And I've had tough kids who, I mean, man, they can go out there and drop 20 points, but they are terrible to coach. Yeah. They're terrible teammates. And it's like, well, what's your real purpose here? Because I'd rather drop you, not have to worry about you, and have someone else, have 5 other people make up your 20 points than have to coach you.
Yeah, and have more fun.
Have more fun, right? And I think sometimes we miss that in our centers, right? It's like the job we do is awesome, right? Like it's tough, it's gritty. There are harder days than others, but genuinely, when you look at what we do and the impact we have, whether the public sees it or not, there's no place like it.
Right.
So let's make our centers a place that we want to be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're getting ready to do it's almost October, so it's time to buy pumpkins for the pumpkin carving contest.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's like our cornerstone event here for our annual stuff that we do.
Oh my gosh.
So we have 3 shifts here, and I buy 3 pumpkins, and the 3 of them, they get together as shifts, which is great team building, and they make some out stuff. And the department usually post them on social media, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah, heck yeah. And that shows the public, oh my gosh, there's a dispatch center here. Oh my gosh, dispatchers are there.
Our social media guy has gotten really pretty good about posting some
amazing.
Yeah, some stuff from inside. There's we just had the hurricane come through, and he posted on Facebook and Instagram a post, and it showed our emergency operations center, which is in the same building as us. And then he posted a whole bunch of pictures of people on the phones in the 911 center. And I'm like, when was there ever a photographer in here? And they're like, I'm like, getting your pictures taken? They're like, no. I'm like, still, it's pretty cool because it was like the 3rd or 4th post I've seen over the last couple months that feature like in the 911 center. Yeah. And I get shows up with their cell phone, snaps a couple of pictures, and they send out a really nice post. I like it. It's good. I think that agencies need to embrace social media in that professional manner and that consistent. We're putting out the message that, hey, here are these professionals here to help you. This is what they do. This is what it looks like where they work. Unfortunately, sometimes the 911 related social media is so doom and gloom, particularly personal pages that people start.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like, could we not make this public? You were complaining about our boss or the hours or the dumb callers, and I'm like, let's not get into that stereotype. Let's represent ourselves in a professional manner. But that's that's another thing that I had to learn as a manager. When I got promoted, I thought we should all wear jeans and t-shirts all the time, and as you can see, but that's one of the things I've noticed in attending APCO is that as an industry, we could do a better job of presenting ourselves in a professional manner.
1,000%. I mean, one of the things that I talk about in my newest session that I presented in Kansas, it's called Beyond the Like, and it's about social media.
Okay.
And if we're not using our social media platforms as a department to educate the community that we're serving, how we serve them, our non-emergency number, what can you report online? What are you going to be asked when you call 911? What are you going to be asked when you call non-emergency? If we're not posting that stuff, we're like just missing this opportunity to connect with the community we serve.
And when we do go out in the community, well, unfortunately, at least here in Florida, the majority of people that show up at conferences, they show up at meetings, are in Florida casual, cargo shorts and a t-shirt. My guys were at work, no shorts, no flip flops. And I have people that are like, well, man, I have to go to this class. You're making me go to this class at another agency. Do I have to wear my uniform? Yes, you do. Yeah, you do. Just, if we wore civilian clothes, I'd say you got to dress it up a little bit.
You got to meet each other halfway, right?
Yeah.
I get to wear jeans on Friday, or we got to meet people halfway. Because at my old department, we had blues, so we had like the full on uniform like you're wearing, but we would only wear those for special events. But we had them available,
right.
And then we would wear like tactical pants or khakis, and then a polo. But then we got to wear jeans on Fridays. And so, the department was like, we want to uphold this certain level of professionalism, but we also realize that you guys are humans doing this job and we want to meet you halfway. And that's, I think, is what we should be doing in our centers, is meeting folks halfway.
Yeah, and that's exactly how we do it here. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you can wear jeans, you can wear t-shirts, you can wear tennis. But for a long time, there was such a fight against that. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, they're like, we want to wear jeans every day, and I'm like, but part of your benefit package is a uniform allowance.
Yeah.
Buy these ugly clothes that you don't want to wear anywhere else, but you don't ever have to put on clothes and wear them out. You don't have to outfit in the morning. And I'm like, and we get athletic shoes too. So I'm like, if you keep pushing back on this, we don't want to wear our uniforms, you might convince somebody to take it away from you, and then you don't get the free athletic shoes, and you don't get the $500 uniform allowance, and then you got to go buy work clothes.
Yeah.
So now you're actually at a minus sign.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, what was it like making that transition of frontline to manager? How did you? I feel like a lot of folks who make this jump probably struggle with the boundary aspect, right? These used to be your friends,
yes,
and now you're their boss. What was that transition like?
I did a terrible job of that. Free to admit, did a terrible job of that. Not so much when I was the assistant manager, because the manager was there to say, hey, it looks like you're playing favorites. It looks like you're doing this, like you're doing that. And I knew what she was saying. But it's tough because people who you're friends with on the floor, that's what we call the 911 center, the floor work. They have expectations. Well, you're going to bring me with you, or you're only going to listen to my ideas, because we were friends, we were the best dispatchers, and we were the team. And it's like, you're going to make sure that I go to the conferences. I get to go to all the conferences. And, it's, at first you're like, yeah, they deserve that. Because, we worked out there on the floor together, and they really are the best ones. So they should get rewarded. And they didn't, I saw them not get rewarded. And then you're making decisions, and they're sending you emails, they're texting you and saying, hey, we should really do this, we should really do that. And then you start to realize, I may not be doing it on purpose, but I'm allowing them to influence me into making decisions that I shouldn't be making, or I am giving them favoritism. They've had their turn to go to a conference that we paid for. They've had their turn to go to a class. Now it needs to be somebody else's turn. And that was, for a while, I had a group of people that we all thought we were the best dispatchers, and they did influence me. And not that they were wrong in a lot of the stuff they said, but I did allow their influence to be too great on me. And we made some decisions that, looking back on them, hindsight being 2020, it probably did look like they were getting favoritism, even when they weren't, or if they weren't, it probably did look like they were. And then I had to, and this is where I kind of screwed up. More so, I overcorrected, and got done by seniority. And, I had to become very strict about everything. And they're like, well, you're not the fun guy we remember. And I'm like, well, I am. I just can't be the fun guy here. And then, I had to say, listen, we got to do some hard stuff, and you guys have to work some overtime, and you have to modify your jobs to do some stuff you don't want to do, but we're short a bunch of people, and everybody has to pitch in. And they all wanted to say, well, yeah, but not me. I don't get mandatory overtime, or I get to keep my weekend days off. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. But because I didn't set the boundary at first, it was a tough transition. Now everything is, I understand that there's a process. We are all following the process as it is written. If I make a modification to the process, is I'm doing it at my discretion for the benefit of the division, not for the benefit of any individual. And that's, people's feelings got hurt. But when you accept a role as a manager, you accept a responsibility. And if they're truly your friend, they will understand that you have to make decisions as a manager, and they don't put you in a bad position.
Yeah.
But sometimes people have a hard time with that.
Boundaries are hard. Boundaries are hard to set. Boundaries are hard to respect and get used to.
Yeah.
And especially when there was no boundary there before.
Right. And it's, it's been tough, and it's, I went to a public safety leadership development class a couple of years ago, and that was super helpful. That was super, super helpful. I took the DISC personality assessment. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Tracy does those.
Okay. So I am clearly a D. I mean, no extra in there, nothing. And it's very firmly what my personality is. What I need is a C around me to say, hold on, Matt. The process. And my boss is also taking that class, and he understands. So I said, I'm a D. He said, I understand. And he said, there has to be a process, and we have to follow the process to keep us out of trouble. And it was helpful for me, because now it was kind of eye-opening, and I understand that I would pick the people who I knew would get the job done immediately, right away, the way I would want it done, because I just wanted the result, right? I just wanted it done. And now I realize that me picking those people sometimes seemed like favoritism, and sometimes people who would shine if I'd given them the opportunity got passed over. So now I follow the process, look for volunteers. There's rotating basis for certain things, but I got to dial it back to, I just want it done now, to, is everybody getting an opportunity? And that's kind of, we're coming up to equity, and equity is something, that I've really tried to embrace with people. And it's not, a lot of people go, oh, DEI is ruining this or that. But as a manager, when I think about equity, I'm like, is everybody getting the same opportunity to end up?
Oh yeah, I love me some DEI. And I mean, we all have to recognize we all have our own bias, naturally,
but what we were doing, what I was doing is, I was stuck in, this is how we've always done new hire training. We're always going to do it this way. And our way was not reaching everybody. It wasn't. Your equity comes in. Some people need hands-on learning. Some people need that PowerPoint presentation with a video. Some people do to read the book to them. Not a lot, but some people do. But you need to do all those things so that they all have the opportunity to get 100% on that test and be successful out there on the floor. And we weren't doing that, because I'm like, well, this is how Matt learned it, and this is how my senior people learned it, and the people I think are the best dispatchers here, they went through the training program and they did fine. So why are we going to change it? Then we can change it so that we could meet other people's learning needs and give them the opportunity to have a good outcome.
Yeah, and sometimes people don't even really know what their learning needs are. They're going based off what they did in high school or what they believed their learning style was, and it's really, our training should touch on every aspect or way of training.
Absolutely.
And it's just going to help.
Yeah, because it's our responsibility as the people in leadership positions to say, we know more about learning than you do. We're teaching it. So we need to be, aware of what the adult learning philosophies are, styles. We need to make sure that we're hitting all those needs. And if somebody's struggling, we need to have time to sit with them and say, hey, what else can we try to help you? Do you have suggestions? And they're not going to, a lot of people aren't going to know, well, I'm a kinesthetic learner. They're just going to know, hey, let me do it with somebody watching me and I might learn better. Okay, let's try that. Instead of getting caught with the buzzwords and the right terms, we've got to say, hey, what's been successful for you in the past so we can get you through the struggle point. And so just, well, here's the test and you got a 40. It's time for you to go.
Yeah. And I mean, also, I think sometimes we can, as someone who trained and lateraled, sometimes we get caught in this, like, we have 12 hours and we're going to work for this whole 12 hours and you're going to sit and answer phones for 12 hours. And it's like, sometimes we need an hour off the floor to breathe, to learn, study in a different way.
Yep.
Like, it's going to be okay, everyone. We don't need 12 hours of radio. Like, just
we would embrace more when people have a bad day, particularly the new hires. Hey, it's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. But the trading paper, and I'm sure you all use trading paperwork that's very similar. It can be depressing to fill it out. It can be depressing to get,
you're gonna get slammed in every freaking call.
Right? But I wish we had a field at the bottom of it that said it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Circle it. It's going to be okay. We had a bad day, but that's okay. It's going to be okay. I'm here with you. I'm going to take ownership of your success. And it's like every call had something wrong, and I had to move it down because that's what I'm required to do.
And that is another thing that I tell, because a lot of folks will be like, Ashley, I passed. I'm going into training, and I'm like, okay, but now's where the emotional roller coaster begins. I did a couple reels where I was just like, if you're in training and your trainer is acting like they were perfect and that you should know all this stuff already, I'm like, they're liars. This training process is tough. It's hard. If you feel like you have no idea what's going on, that's normal.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And sometimes when I meet the new hires and they're kind of stressed, and they're like, something, I'm like, oh, what are you guys talking about? And they'll tell me whatever topic it is. And I'm like, let me tell you about the time I screwed that up.
That part. Yes.
Let me tell you about when I was not perfect.
Yes.
Let me count the times off. And the only problem is, when you do that too much, particularly as a manager, the people that work for you that do the training, instead of telling the story about when they weren't perfect, they're like, let me tell you about the time Matt.
Let me tell you about that man up there. Look, he's the manager. Let me tell you about what he did.
Yeah, let me tell you what he did. Let me tell you about he called out when he wasn't. Like, wait a minute.
But I do love that. I love everyone, like, we're gonna mess up. There is not one time across any podcast episode, any social media post that I put out there that I'm out here claiming I am the best dispatcher in the world, because I'm not. I'm human, doing a human job. I've made mistakes. My partners make mistakes. It's gonna be okay.
I gotta tell you, I don't think EMD doesn't do it anymore, but they used to give the high compliance awards. I never got one of those. Ever. I didn't get a lot of low compliance, but I never got high compliance.
Well, looking back, through the 12 years that it took to rise in the ranks, what is one thing that you would change or lesson you would love others to learn from?
You know what? I would have embraced leadership and management training at an earlier time. Like, really embraced it and listened to what they were saying. I really was convinced that I got, promoted early, and it created some arrogance in me that I thought, well, by the force of my personality, I can just, make things happen. I really wish that I had been enrolled in the leadership class I took here at the local school of public safety. My first year in management as the assistant manager. And I kind of wish I had gone out and found more leadership training when it wasn't being supplied by the department for whatever reason. They hadn't embraced it or whatever. I don't know. Who cares, right? What I wish is if I had personally embraced the idea that I needed to learn a lot more than I already knew. And I like to push that kind of training down to my shift supervisors and even to my senior dispatchers. Like, hey, I'm not going to be around all the time. I mean, I got a long way to go, but what if I'm on vacation and what if my assistant manager quits tomorrow? Which is it this year? It's either this year or next year. She can quit anytime she wants because she's reached.
Mm-hmm.
I need to have people ready, and I need to give them the training that I feel now, looking back, I was lacking, so that they can
Mm-hmm.
those roles. I don't want to do. I want to do succession planning. I do not want candidate replacement. I don't want to pick one person and say, well, you're going to be the next assistant manager or manager, and we're going to send you to all these trainings and ignore everybody else. I want them all to get training, and particularly on how things that don't happen in the dispatch centers, the things that happen as an administrator, as a manager happen, why it's important to, get some training on that, why they can't just go back there and say, well, this is how we've always done it. Matt's not here, so I'm going to make a decision about somebody's FMLA or somebody's ADA accommodation, and I come back from a cruise and we get slapped with a lawsuit because they're like, well, I knew better. This is how we used to do it. I'm like, no, there's a training class. There's an expert. There's a process. We got to do it this way. I mean, or they were just, mandating people if we got to just follow the process. We got to learn why it's important. I know I've said that a bunch, but yeah, I want my supervisors and I want my senior dispatchers to get more seniority training or more administrator training, managerial training that I wish I had.
I think this is a wonderful point, and it's something that I say often that I've witnessed in many jobs is that we promote people because they do this job well and they've been doing this job a long time, and then we leave them alone.
Yeah,
we're like, they know what they're doing. They don't need any additional training, and it's like, no, I know what I'm doing over here.
Right
now, I'm doing this new job. I'm qualified. I'm able and willing. But I also need to learn more. I need to learn how to do this job. And if you're not going to teach me, I need to go somewhere where I can learn some stuff to bring back and put in my tool belt.
Yeah, because the way you manage people, even the way you manage people as a shift supervisor in a 911 center is different than an administrative role. And, one of the things that I have come up against is if you work for a city or a big agency, you're not an independent 911 center. Like human resources, they don't understand the environment in the 911 center.
No, they don't.
Somebody puts in a bad address and their supervisor, yells across the room, hey, that's the wrong address. They're like, I can't believe you admonished somebody in public. And I'm like, well, because the fire engine and the ambulance were going to the right place to get there for somebody's grandmother having a heart attack. Oh, that's not, that's how we treat people. And we're, you can't do that anymore. And like, but we have to, but that's how we learn to supervise people in a 911 center. And that can supervise an entire agency of dispatchers. When it gets to the manager's level that you have to have a conversation with somebody because they messed up, you cannot do it in the 911 center. You cannot do it in front of other people. So used to correcting people's mistakes out loud because we think it has life or death consequences. And a lot of it does. And that calling out and shouting out thing, you can't do that as a manager. You can't. That's how you end up, with a really uncomfortable conversation where the person from HR is there and the union rep is there and you're getting called and you're like, but I just did what I've been doing for the last 10 years as the supervisor. They screwed up. I called them out. Like, no, you just them in front of their coworkers and embarrass them. And you're like, but 4 weeks before the date on my promotion paperwork, I did the same thing. Oh, you can't do that anymore. Like, okay.
Yeah.
That's hard to learn. It's hard for us to learn because we are used to correcting things away.
No, it's so true. I mean, we as folks who are still on the front line, I think often we are like, well, they didn't do this for my supervisor. They need to do this. They need to do that. And it's like, I think we have to remember to give our supervisors grace, because they have a tough job. They're the bearers of bad news. When it gets to their desk, it has escalated 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So they're not getting a lot of training. We need to give them grace as well, the same grace we'd want them to give us.
Yeah, one of the things I get when people are like, well, I want to file a grievance because nobody else has ever been written up for what I got written up for. I'm like, you don't do that. You don't do that. Like,
That's like the person who calls me and goes, I got a ticket for parking in the red, and there's all these cars parked in the red. Someone needs to come tell them.
well, I don't know who got written up for being late last year. And I'm like, that's not your business. Did you
Mhm.
show up on time? Well, no. Okay, then. Then you weren't here on time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We have to have accountability for
It,
when we messed up, you know?
a lot of it's the environment because we see each other making mistakes and stuff. And
Mhm.
so, when you're in the comm center and you can see all your coworkers and you can see your supervisor, and like your supervisor's on the phone because you're overwhelmed because there's a car fire on the interstate, and your coworker like shows up back late from break and the supervisor doesn't see it. You're like, well, I guess I'm going to show up late for break too. And you're like, wait a minute, that's not the right way to behave.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I guess my analogy is always, if you could, like you said, if somebody's parked in the red zone, you get pulled over for speeding and you get the speeding ticket, you say to the cop, well, I wasn't the only one speeding. The cop does not care. You're
Does
still
not
getting,
care. You gonna get this ticket,
now you're getting another ticket.
right?
But some of that mentality is what I dislike about the 911 center is like the I want to be in everybody's business. I want to know what their discipline is. I
Yeah.
want to know what their pay rate is. I want to know, I'm like, why can't you sit next to them and enjoy being good coworkers with each other?
Yeah. And talk to each other. When like I have often seen like instead of having a conversation with your coworker, like an email gets sent. And it's just like just talk to them, let them know what you need from them as their shift partner.
Yeah, the one we had is, this goes back years ago, is um why didn't you include me in getting breakfast? I was like, well, you were on a break. But instead, they sent a big email out that said, remember, please include everybody on shift before you order a meal out. And it's like,
It's nice. It feels good, but I mean,
did it
there's
happen
there's no policy on that. Let's come on, guys.
to all sorts of people who were on vacation, who were out
Mhm.
sick, who had no idea you even ate breakfast? I'm
Yeah.
like, this didn't have to go this way.
Right? They're like, Bridget didn't get her sausage McMuffin. I can't.
Cracker Barrel, I don't know. I don't remember. It wasn't one that scarred me for life, but that was one of those emails that I'm always like,
You're like, oh my gosh. That's so funny.
yeah.
Well, as we come to a close, the last question that I ask everyone who comes onto the show is, what advice would you give someone who is considering a career in dispatch?
If here's what I'll say: if you have a flexible schedule, you're not tied to, I got to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I got to pick kids up. I got to take them to school and stuff. It's really a great career if you can stick it out in the feedback section of training. We do, because you're helping people. You get to live where it's warm, or not live. You get to work where it's warm and safe and dry. The air conditioner usually works. You don't have to work in the sun or the rain or the heat or the cold. And in exchange for that, you got to work the crazy hours. But man, you meet great people. Just, you got to stick it out through that training though, and come into it with eyes wide open. Most of us who start this career have never worked in a 911 center before, and those first couple of months, they're going to be rough on your ego, but you got to stick it out.
Mhm. Amazing. Amazing advice and so true. If you make it through training, it really is a heck of a career. Matthew, thank you so much for coming onto the show,
Thanks for having
sharing your experience. We don't get to hear from you folks as much as we should
I
about
know.
the lessons learned, and I really do appreciate that level of vulnerability that you presented
Yeah,
during this hour.
yeah, and everybody who listens to your podcast who wants to be a manager or has just become a manager, y'all gonna screw up. Accept it, learn from it, and be honest about screwing up. Use the term "my bad, I messed that up," and
Mhm.
it'll go a lot easier if you realize you screw up instead of just instead of pretending like you didn't make a mistake. That's a better way to go, for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Well, again, Matthew, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I've learned so much from this conversation as well.
good deal. Oh,
Awesome. I'll be right back with you.
okay,
All right, everybody. That was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. Again, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show, representing for supervisors, managers, the folks who are helping the frontline folks answer these calls every single day. Genuinely, let's remember to give our supervisors grace. They are oftentimes promoted and kind of left to fend for themselves. So if you are dealing with a supervisor that's struggling, remember that. If you are a supervisor who is struggling, demand and ask for extra training and extra support so you can be the best supervisor for your people. There are a lot of supervisors and folks in our private Facebook group, the Let's Talk Dispatch group on Facebook, who are there to help you run through problems. You can post anonymously. It's a really great space that actually just hit 1,000 members. It's a super positive group. I really enjoy it. And if you're interested, whether you are a supervisor, whether you are a aspiring dispatcher, whether you're a current dispatcher who's been doing this for 1 minute or for 25 years, it's an awesome place to connect and give each other feedback with hard things going on. With all that being said, stay raspy, everybody. See you next time. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.